Come along for the ride.
Welcome to the Solar Coaster, the wild ride to the solar industry told by the people living it every day. I'm Anna Covert.
And I'm Alex Herrera.
Imagine running a massive digital empire, artificial intelligence models training around the clock, massive server farms humming 24/7, and electric vehicles plugging into the grid by the millions. All of this requires a staggering amount of electricity. The knee jerk reaction from a lot of legacy utilities is to say, well, we need to build more fossil fuel plants fast, and it's going to cost consumers a fortune. But what if that whole premise is completely wrong? What if clean energy is actually the cheapest, fastest way to meet this historic surge in demand, provided we fix the outdated rules holding it back?
That is precisely the core message of a major report released by the think tank Energy Innovation. They laid out 20 concrete policy strategies that state leaders, whether we're talking about governors, state legislatures, or public utility commissions, can deploy right now. The big takeaway is that we don't need to wait for some miraculous future technology to secure affordable, clean power. The tools already exist, but our regulatory systems are still operating like it's 1995.
It's fascinating because when people think about the energy transition, they usually picture giant wind turbines or high tech solar farms. They rarely think about utility integrated resource plans or state permitting laws. Yet, those invisible administrative mechanics are where the real war for cheap energy is being fought.
Absolutely. If you look at what's driving electricity demand right now, it's not just gradual population growth. It's an exponential spike driven by data centers, industrial electrification, and electric transport. Energy innovations analysis proves that meeting this new load with renewables paired with storage isn't just an environmental choice, it's a cost-saving imperative. But to unlock those savings, states have to remove the institutional friction points.
Let's break down those friction points. One area that immediately jumps out in the report is system planning and how utilities forecast costs. How are traditional utilities getting this wrong, and what is energy innovation proposing instead?
In many states, when a utility drafts its long-term plan, what's known as an integrated resource plan, they use outdated, inflated cost assumptions for renewables while underestimating the volatility of fossil fuels like natural gas. Then, if gas prices spike, who pays for it? The customers do through fuel adjustment clauses on their monthly bills. Energy innovation suggests a brilliant structural shift. If fuel costs skyrocket above predictions, the utility itself should absorb a portion of that cost through reduced profits, rather than passing 100% of the risk onto captive ratepayers.
That completely shifts the financial incentive. If a utility's bottom line is on the line when natural gas prices fluctuate, they're going to be a lot more motivated to procure clean energy that has zero fuel cost risk.
Exactly. It aligns corporate profit with consumer interest. Another huge innovation in system planning involves competitive all-source procurements. Look at Colorado. Instead of a utility saying, we want to build a specific gas plant, they open up a bid where wind, solar, batteries, demand response, and gas all compete on a level playing field. Time and time again, when you let resources compete openly, clean energy packages win on price.
That makes total sense for open wholesale markets. But what about states where corporate giants, like tech companies building massive data centers, want 100% clean power, but they operate in traditional monopoly utility territories where bilateral corporate power purchase agreements aren't legally allowed?
That has been a massive headache for tech companies trying to hit zero carbon goals. The report highlights a fresh workaround called a clean transition tariff. Nevada pushed this forward through a deal between Google and NV Energy. Essentially, it creates a specialized rate structure allowing large commercial customers to directly underwrite and receive power from new clean energy projects built specifically for them without shifting costs onto everyday residential customers or violating local utility structures. It's a win-win that allows big tech to bring its own clean power to the table.
That's a clever policy hack. But even if you have the right planning and tariffs, you eventually have to actually build these projects. And that brings us to what might be the single biggest bottleneck in the country right now: permitting and local zoning.
It's a massive hurdle. The report notes the alarming trend. Roughly 24% of all U.S. counties now have some form of restriction or outright ban on utility-scale solar or wind development. Think about that. Nearly a quarter of the country is putting up regulatory stop signs.
A quarter of all counties is an astounding number. How can state governments step in without completely steamrolling local communities?
It's a delicate balance, but several states are establishing clear statewide permitting standards instead of letting every tiny jurisdiction create arbitrary hyper-restrictive setbacks or bans that kill projects. States can create standardized, predictable environmental and siting reviews. This gives developers a clear timeline while still ensuring real environmental protections and community benefit agreements. If a project meets high, standardized criteria, local political whim can't just kill it infinitely.
Beyond land permits, there's also the physical grid itself. We keep hearing about the interconnection queue, thousands of clean energy projects sitting in line for years, just waiting for permission to plug into the transmission network. Is there a way to speed that up without spending billions on new transmission lines that take a decade to build?
Yes, and this is where grid utilization strategies get really exciting. Energy innovation points out that we are wildly underutilizing the wire infrastructure we already have. States like Indiana, Maryland, and Virginia are leading the charge by requiring utilities to look at surplus interconnection.
What does surplus interconnection look like in practice?
Picture a power plant that only uses its grid connection at full capacity 40 or 50% of the time, like a solar farm that doesn't produce at night or an old thermal plant that's being dialed down. Instead of building a brand new transmission line for a new project, you allow a secondary generator, like a solar array or a battery storage system, to plug into that exact same point of connection. You're essentially carpooling on the electrical grid.
That's such an obvious fix. It's like letting a delivery truck use an empty lane during off-peak hours instead of building a whole new highway lane.
Precisely. And on top of that, there are advanced transmission technologies, often called reconductoring. You keep the existing steel towers, but you swap out the old saggy copper or steel cables with modern high performance composite core conductors. You can literally double or triple the power capacity of an existing corridor in a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the cost of building new infrastructure.
It sounds like a no-brainer. So why aren't all utilities doing this automatically?
Because of traditional utility business models, historically, utilities make their profit by spending large amounts of capital on massive, expensive new infrastructure assets. Spending less money to optimize existing lines through clever software or advanced conductors doesn't yield the same guaranteed financial return under legacy rate structures. That's why state regulators have to step in and explicitly mandate these operational evaluations.
That really highlights why state policy is the key that unlocks everything else. But let me push back a bit or look at the full picture. The Energy Innovation Report focuses heavily on large-scale utility strategies and policy frameworks. But what about small-scale distributed energy, like residential rooftop solar and home batteries? Does the report cover that sufficiently?
That's actually a major point of discussion among industry experts. While the Energy Innovation Report touches on distributed resources, praising integrated distribution planning, virtual power plants, and automated rooftop permitting, some advocates argue it overlooks crucial micro-level strategies.
Like what? What did they leave out?
If you look at recommendations from organizations like the Interstate Renewable Energy Council or the Department of Energy's Distributed Energy Resource Interconnection Roadmap, they point to very specific technical standards. For example, requiring smart inverters on all rooftop solar systems, publishing accurate grid hosting capacity maps so installers know exactly where the grid has spare capacity, and establishing standardized baseline interconnection rules.
Why are hosting capacity maps and smart inverters so crucial? Can you translate that into plain terms?
Think of hosting capacity maps as a real-time GPS for the electrical grid if a solar installer wants to put solar on a commercial roof. Right now, they often have to submit an application and wait months just to find out if the local circuit can handle the power. A hosting capacity map shows everyone online. Green zone here, feel free to plug in. Red zone there, grid is congested. It eliminates guesswork. And smart inverters act like intelligent traffic controllers on the rooftop solar system itself, automatically adjusting voltage so the local grid stays stable without requiring expensive utility transformer upgrades.
So while energy innovation provides a macro policy playbook for large-scale utility reform and state legislation, frameworks like the IREC roadmap provide the micro-level engineering and consumer-facing policies. You really need both working in tandem to build a resilient, low-cost system.
Exactly. You can't ignore the macro utility level because that's where the massive gigawatts for data centers will come from. But you also can't ignore the distributed edge because virtual power plants aggregating thousands of home batteries and smart thermostats can shave off peak demand spikes at a microscopic cost compared to building new peaking power plants.
Let's talk more about virtual power plants, or VPPs. The concept sounds almost futuristic, thousands of homes working together like a giant power plant. How close are we to making VPPs a mainstream reality across the states?
We're much closer than most people realize, but it requires state policy to unlock the market. A VPP basically aggregates small energy assets, home batteries, smart water heaters, electric vehicle chargers, and connects them through smart software. When grid demand surges on a hot summer afternoon, instead of firing up a dirty, expensive gas peaker plant, the grid operator sends a signal to thousands of home batteries to discharge a little bit of power or tells smart thermostats to adjust by 1 degree.
And the homeowner gets compensated for contributing their stored energy or adjusting their usage.
Right. But for that to happen, state regulators must establish rules that allow these aggregated micro resources to bid directly into wholesale or retail capacity markets. States like Massachusetts and California have shown that VPPs can deliver real grid reliability during extreme heat waves. It's cheaper for the utility, profitable for the consumer, and cleaner for the environment.
Another interesting element in the Energy Innovation Report was the idea of developing clean energy on brownfields, industrial sites, former coal mines, or contaminated lands. But the report noted that this has been surprisingly challenging in places like New York State. Why is redeveloping brownfields for clean energy so difficult?
On paper, brownfield development sounds ideal. You're taking land that isn't suitable for housing or agriculture and installing solar arrays or battery banks. Plus, these sites often already have existing grid connections from old industrial operations. But in reality, environmental liability issues, complex cleanup standards, and lingering legal questions over who is responsible for historical contamination can stall projects in court for years. It requires states to pass specific liability shield laws and streamlined environmental reviews to give clean energy developers the confidence to invest in those sites.
It really underscores that every single one of these policy solutions requires meticulous regulatory craft. It's not enough to just say we want clean energy. You have to fix liability laws, reform utility profit models, mandate smart inverter settings, update permitting timelines, and modernize planning software.
That's the core takeaway. The energy transition isn't waiting on a secret technological breakthrough in a lab. Solar panel efficiency is already incredible. Battery costs have plummeted over the last decade. Wind turbines are more powerful than ever. The barrier is institutional inertia. We are trying to run a 21st century digital economy on a regulatory framework designed for 20th century centralized fossil fuel monopolies.
So, if you're a state legislator or a utility commissioner looking at the next decade, facing massive new power demands from artificial intelligence, data centers, and manufacturing, what is the first principle to keep in mind?
The first principle is that clean energy is no longer a luxury good or an expensive environmental compromise. It is the cheapest, most agile resource available. But to capture those cost savings, you have to actively reform the rules of the game. If you stick with the status quo, utilities will naturally default to what they know, building expensive, capital-intensive fossil fuel infrastructure, passing the cost and fuel price volatility directly onto consumers, and slowing down the economy.
And if states do adopt these 20 strategies, streamlining permits, unlocking surplus grid capacity, enabling clean transition tariffs, and opening up competitive bidding, what does the energy landscape look like 10 years from now?
You get a grid that is dramatically more resilient, significantly cheaper to operate, and capable of absorbing massive new industrial demand without crushing consumers with sky-high utility bills. You create a dynamic ecosystem where big tech companies can power data centers with local clean energy, homeowners can earn revenue from their garage batteries, and utilities are rewarded for efficiency rather than wasteful spending.
It leaves us with a compelling question for listeners and policymakers alike. As power demand surges for the first time in decades, will state leaders step up to modernize the rules, or will outdated regulations cost us hundreds of billions of dollars in missed opportunities? The choice isn't technical, it's political and regulatory.
Absolutely. The playbook is right there on the table. The states that act first will attract the industries, the jobs, and the lower power bills of the future, while those that wait will be left paying the price for old ways of thinking.
I want a solar coaster. Come along for the ride.
This
episode of The Solar Coaster is narrated using AI-generated technology, representing Anna Covert and Alex Herrera. The material presented is aggregated from publicly available solar industry news sources. All commentary reflects reported industry developments and does not constitute personal opinions, investment advice, or endorsements by the hosts or
Solar
producers.
Coaster is proudly sponsored by Sun Energy Today, redefining what solar means for business and infrastructure. We engineer and deliver large-scale clean energy solutions, from megawatt solar farms to advanced graphene storage, designed for resilience, performance, and measurable return. Sun Energy Today, built to power what's next. Learn more at sunenergytoday.com.